Hello, and thank you for joining me today as we continue our discussion on the nervous system. Today we're going to talk about the meninges, the cerebrospinal fluid, the spinal cord, and some different pieces there. So let's get started. First off, your meninges are connective tissue surrounding your central nervous system. So we talk about things like meningitis. That's inflammation of this connective tissue, this protective layer surrounding your central nervous system. There are three layers of your meninges. The outermost layer is called dura mater, which carries blood vessels and nerves. And so when this gets aggravated or inflamed or damaged, this is where you get your headaches. This covers your brain, forms a supportive and protective partition, so it connects to your brain on the outside. It just provides support, so it connects it to the more stable structures such as your spine and your skull. Continues into the spinal column and surrounds the spinal cord. So this is all, it goes from your brain to your spinal cord the entire way down. Beneath your dura mater, you have this second layer called the arachnoid mater. So arachnids are spiders. And so this is our middle layer. It forms a web-like membrane connecting your dura mater with your pia mater on the inside. But within this membrane, this web, we have what's called this subarachnoid space. And this space is really important because this houses what we call your cerebrospinal fluid. This is your fluid lubrication, so it's kind of like an oil. It also provides nutrients and minerals and everything that your nerves and your nerve cells need to function correctly. So this cerebrospinal fluid is really important for that matter. And then on the inside, very inside, we have pia mater, which is very thin. Connects directly to your brain and your spinal cord. So this is the far inside layer, which connects your arachnoid matter and your dura mater to your brain and spinal cord. But that's called your pia mater. We mentioned cerebrospinal fluid. So cerebrospinal fluid is this fluid that lubricates and provides nutrients to your central nervous system. It is produced in these things called ventricles, which are regions. So they're found in your cerebral hemispheres and brainstem. They're continuous with your central canal. For the spinal cord, you have 4 of them. The lateral ventricles refer to ventricles 1 and 2, or your first and second ventricles, which here, so we have on this diagram, there's a lateral ventricle there. So this space here, we have your also one up here. So this is just a different view, same kind of thing. Your first and second ventricles are really close to each other. And so that is where those are found. They produce cerebrospinal fluid, which we'll talk about. Your next 2 ventricles, your third and fourth ventricles, are found within your cerebral hemispheres also. So this is giving you a different look at it all. So we have your third ventricle is this one here. So third ventricle is housed right here. And your fourth ventricle is housed over here. And so these arrows are showing you the flow of cerebrospinal fluid. So it starts out being produced here. This is your first and second ventricles, or your lateral ventricles, which produce cerebrospinal fluid. It flows this direction, flows anteriorly towards the front, and then gets met up or runs into the third ventricle, which produces more and pushes it down into your brain stem. And from here, it continues around. Eventually, your cerebrospinal fluid is going to make it back this way. So it's going to go down your spinal column and back up. Eventually it gets here and it goes around your brain all the way and gets absorbed into these granulations. So this is where it gets reabsorbed so the nutrients can be reused. So your body is very good at recycling. But that's how this all kind of goes together. And so you can see your different coverings of your meninges. So if your pia mater is on the inside, it's this pinkish color here. Outside of that, we have your subarachnoid space and your arachnoid mater. So this blue gap is the space. That's where the cerebrospinal fluid goes. Here's your arachnoid mater. And then outside of that, or superficial to that, is going to be your dura mater, which is this purple stuff here, which is a thicker covering. And then again, that dura mater connects directly to your skull here or your spine down below. But this is cerebrospinal fluid. These are the nutrients that your nerve cells need, and this is how they are circulated around your brain and spinal column. And again, they get reabsorbed up into here in these granulations to be reabsorbed as nutrients, and they can be reproduced and make the cycle again. So a little bit more. So your third and fourth ventricles, your third ventricle is in your diencephalon, which we talked about previously, and your fourth is posterior to the pons and the medulla oblongata. So that's there. This is showing you how cerebrospinal fluid flows. So it's going down here in this direction, then it crosses over, it makes a transition, and it heads back up this way at the bottom of your spinal column. Again, you see your different layers. Your dura mater on the outside, arachnoid matter inside of that, and your pia mater is connected directly to your spinal cord. So again, between your pia mater and your arachnoid matter, you have your subarachnoid space. That is where this cerebrospinal fluid goes. But those are your meninges. Again, your cerebrospinal fluid originates in your lateral ventricles. Those first and second ventricles start producing cerebrospinal fluid. You get more of it as you get to your third and fourth ventricles, but the purpose is to provide the brain and spinal cord with nutrients as well as absorbing some shock, so you don't get the instant damage from bone on nerves that you would have if you didn't have the cerebrospinal fluid. So it acts as a lubricant, an oil, kind of a cushioning gel. Your spinal cord, so if we go down, we get past the brain, we get to the spinal cord. Your spinal cord is a column of nerves, continuous with the brain. There are 31 segments, each which gives rise to a pair of spinal nerves. One goes left, one goes right. Within these 31 segments are found in different regions of your spinal cord. And so your cervical region, which is your neck, has 8 nerves, which supply nerves to the head, neck, and arms. If you think back, we had 7 cervical vertebrae. So there's one nerve in between each of those vertebrae, and then one between your skull and C1. Your thoracic vertebrae, there are 12 nerves. Guess how many vertebrae there are? There's 12. So these supply your trunk with nerves, which gives you sensation and as well as motor control. Your lumbar spinal column has 5 nerves. Again, 5 vertebrae. Your lumbar vertebrae, your lumbar nerves, supply feeling and sensation to your abdomen, your pelvis, and your legs. And then we have the sacral region. Remember, your sacrum is those fused vertebrae down near your tailbone. There's 5 nerves here. You have sacral foramina, which these nerves exit through, and these supply, again, your pelvis and legs. And then your coccygeal region, which comes from your coccyx, is 1 nerve, which controls your genital region. But those are the different regions of nerves. Those are the number of nerves that come out, and that is where they supply feeling to. You will notice that your control originates at a point that is superior to the portion of your body being controlled. For example, your cervical region, your neck, controls what happens in your arms and head, in your arms. So your neck is superior to your arms. Your thoracic region supplies your trunk, so your rib cage is higher than your stomach. Lumbar is the abdomen, and then it goes clear down to your pelvis and legs. So you can get back damage in your lumbar vertebrae, and you can have paralysis in your pelvis or your legs because they are controlled from a point superior to that. Your spinal cord, again, is that column of nerves. There's 2 enlargements, so 2 regions that are bigger. They're a big ball of nerves. We call this is a cervical enlargement, and there's a lumbar enlargement. And so each one of these has a large collection of nerves that leaves the body. And then down at the very bottom, the end of your spinal cord, so this is down in your L1, L2 vertebrae, your spinal cord tapers off. This is called the conus medullaris. So this point where it tapers off is called the conus medullaris, forms kind of a cone here. And then off of that conus medullaris, you have what's called the cauda equina. So cauda referring to tail, equina referring to horse. It looks like a horse's tail. Comprised of your lumbar, sacral, and coccygeal nerves. They travel to the place beyond the conus medullaris. So this is where they exit. And we'll look at this. But your spinal cord ends in your upper lumbar. So it ends L1, L2, that's our conus medullaris. Because your spinal cord stops growing early in your years. Your spine will continue because you get taller up through kind of your early teens. Some of you, you're late teens. But before that, your spinal cord is going to quit growing. So that's why it tapers off about L1, L2 on your lumbar vertebrae. And then within all that, we have what's called our central canal. And this is the opening in the middle of the spinal cord that allows your spine to travel down. So this is that opening in each of those vertebrae that lets your spinal cord through. Is called the central canal. This is a look at your spinal cord. So this is your brain stem at the top here. As it comes down, you see this bulge here is called your cervical enlargement. This one down here is your lumbar enlargement. And then you see it taper off. So it forms kind of this cone-looking structure. I'm going to erase that last drawing. But you have this kind of cone-looking structure here called the conus medullaris. And so that will taper down, and eventually you get to your cauda equina down below, which is shown here. So conus medullaris is this point, and then some of those nerves continue down where they finally branch out, looks like a horse's tail, called the cauda equina. This is a superior view, so you can see kind of what your vertebrae and spinal cord look like. So this is a posterior horn, meaning this is towards your back, this is towards your front. Within this you have white matter and you have gray matter. Your gray matter are nerves that are not surrounded by myelin, which we'll talk about, and your white matter has myelin. So the white matter sends signals faster, your gray matter sends a little bit slower. We have our central canal in the middle, which is the middle of the spinal cord. But there's all sorts of different regions here that there's more information on you can get when you get to college. They'll give you kind of more information there. But this is the basics for what it looks like and what it looks like inside of you. Some functions of your spinal cord. So one of the spinal cord functions beyond sending information to and from your brain is one, your spinal cord acts as a reflex arc. It controls your reflexes. So a reflex, if you go to the doctor, you get a physical. They set you on the table and they hit you in the knee with a hammer, which activates your reflex. So a reflex arc is a sensory neuron or receptor receives the message. It goes to your spinal cord where it activates a motor neuron and your action happens. This never gets to your brain. So your brain does not make the decision on your reflexes. So when they hit you in the knee, that signal never got to your brain to say kick. It happens without any analytical thought. The response happens before sensory information ever gets to the brain, so it's sent from the spinal cord. So a spinal reflex is a reflex arc that passes through the spinal cord, and that's kind of where we get your knee kick. And so this is going to look at kind of how it works. So one, you have a receptor here just below the skin. So again, this is the epidermis and the dermis. We have a sensor here. When you activate this sensor, it fires a sensory neuron, which takes information from the outside to the spinal cord. Here, it's going to meet what's called an interneuron, which is a neuron that connects two neurons, your sensory neuron and your motor neuron. So this takes the sensory message, decodes it here, says, I know what to do with that signal, sends it to a motor neuron, which will then go out to your muscles and say, hey, you need to contract. And that's what your knee does. And that's to prevent injury. The point of at least your knee jerk reflex is to prevent injury, prevent hyperextension of your knee. So again, this is your knee jerk reflex. So your muscles are relaxed. We hit a sensory neuron here, which goes to the spinal cord, which goes to an interneuron, and to your motor neuron, and back to your muscle, which says contract, and your leg kicks out. So it hits your patella ligament, which is connected to a muscle, sends a signal, comes back, sends to that same muscle to say, hey, you need to contract and pull to prevent hyperextension, and that's what happens. So that is a safety mechanism. You can have, so that's one type of reflex. We also have what's called a withdrawal reflex. So this is to prevent painful or harmful stimuli from causing excess pain, excess damage. And so, for example, when you put your hand on a hot stove or you step on a tack, you react before your brain really knows why you did that. You touched it and your body pulled it away, and then you say, oh, that was hot. Or you step on a tack and you pick your foot up right, and then you say, oh, I stepped on something sharp. But you reacted, your knee jerk or your reflex happened before you figured out why you were doing it. and that's for safety reasons. So in this case, you have a sensory neuron that gets fired here with the TAC, goes to your spinal cord, which does two things. One, it contracts your hamstring muscles, and it also contracts your hip flexors here, which pull your leg up. So you get a kind of a combo reaction, which we're going to look at on this next slide. And so what happens is you get two different reactions on that one. But your spinal cord has two different tracks. We call them ascending and descending. So ascending means to go up. So this takes sensory information from the periphery, from your stimuli, to your brain. So it sends sensory information to the brain. Your sensory information on the right side of the body will be received by the left side of the brain. So your brain and body are cross-connected. So the right side of your brain controls the left side of your body, which you kind of talked about. This is that same idea. Cold sensations. Why do cold and wet feel the same? Those fire the same receptors, and so they target the same response. And that is, it's hard for your body. Your body can't tell the difference between wet and cold. Your reaction is the same because your body does the same thing in both circumstances. And the last one's descending track. So ascending goes up, descending comes down. These are motor information. These are the controls. Your brain is descending, sending information down, saying, hey, you need to do this, move in this way. Okay, this was your meninges and parts of the brain. I'll give you these review questions. If you would pause the video and answer them, and then make sure you have those ready to go. We'll continue this when you return to class. Thank you for your time and attention. Enjoy the rest of your day.